I cannot wait for Friday night and the start of the Six Nations. And France against Ireland, I mean, that is as good an opener as we've had for years, isn't it? On the Friday night in Marseille, which is a brilliant venue. But the exciting thing today is the teams are out. The first team selections of this Six Nations. And I think for France and for Ireland, some really interesting selections. That's what I'm going to get into in this video. So Ireland fans, French fans, what do you make of the Matchday 23s that Andy Farrell and Fabien Galthie have selected? And also, if you're new here and you're not subscribed, then I'd love it if I can earn your subscription and like the video as well. I'm going to start with Ireland in this video. I often start with the home team, but it was the Irish team news that I found the most interesting. There's good stuff in the French one as well, but in particular with Ireland, a 6-2 bench split. The reason for me that this is interesting, because often we can get too caught up on the benches. I know it became a huge thing at the World Cup and obviously South Africa going 7-1, and you can spend too much time focusing on them. The reason that I find this interesting is because Andy Farrell didn't go for a 6-2 bench split throughout the World Cup. If you look back on the pool games, those big pool games they had against South Africa and against Scotland, they went 5-3, and he did the same for that quarter-final against New Zealand as well. But for this game, they've gone 6-2. And I tell you what, it is a meaty-looking bench as well. I'll put the teams up on the screen. In terms of having the front row replacements, then Ryan, Baird, Conan, those are guys that are going to come on and make an impact. So I suppose I have a few questions here. Is this purely just for this game? Andy Farrell is the ultimate pragmatist. He selects teams to get the job done on the night on this occasion. Is it looking back at the World Cup and thinking actually maybe that was an area of the game they could have done with a 6-2 split on the bench? I don't think that is the case, but I'm just hypothesising here. Or what else could it be? I think it's more to do with the here and now of this game. And in particular, and something that both coaches have spoken about in the build-up to it, is the physicality that will be on display. I think it gives us a really good insight into the type of match we're possibly going to see. In particular, when you consider that France have also gone with a 6-2 split on their bench as well. So for me, personally, I thought that was interesting. I think it's about combating the French. Not so much a new direction for the team, but it is something that I'll keep an eye on throughout this Six Nations to see if they do it more regularly. That was an interesting development. In terms of the other areas of this Ireland team, lack of Ulster representation is maybe a minor point, but I think something worth noting. A reflection of how Ulster and where Ulster are at the moment. I'm sure many of the Ireland fans can have their say in the comments. In terms of the headlines for this team, I think it's Joe McCarthy in the second row. I mentioned James Ryan being on the bench. Calvin Nash on the wing. Someone was always going to have to step in for the injured Mac Hansen, and that is Calvin Nash. And Kieran Frawley on the bench with only two backs replacements, Conor Murray and Frawley, who can play across that back line. He can cover three positions, so his selection makes a lot of sense. With Joe McCarthy, he has had a brilliant start to the season in the URC, in the Champions Cup. I think he could be a name on the team sheet for years moving forward into the future. And actually, you look at the second row options, no Ian Henderson, obviously, but with James Ryan there, with Tyg Byrne, what an important area to have such strength in depth. I think he could really kick on this Six Nations, Joe McCarthy. I'm excited to see how he does. Calvin Nash as well is someone for Munster that when I have watched Munster, and you know, those of you that watch this channel regularly know, being English, being in England, I watch more of the Premiership, but when I do see Munster play, I always think Nash looks really lively and a good option. And the big thing for Ireland with their wingers, with James Lowe and Mac Hansen, as good a players they are in their own right, you also feel like they play in a system that gets the best out of them. So how they fit in to this system and how Nash fits into this Irish system is again something else that I'll be keen to keep an eye on. The final thing, I suppose, with Ireland and their team selection to mention, Gary Ringrose is injured. That's the kind of one name I saw a lot of fans saying, where's Ringrose? He's injured, he's not available. And he is a big blow, but, you know, when you've got Robbie Henshaw and Bundy Aki in your centres, then you're doing all right. It's been the case for quite a number of years now, but England would absolutely die for just one of those three guys. Ireland have got all three of them, although Ringrose misses out. Anything else that takes your guys' attention straight away? Maybe Cian Healy, his return into the team, potentially, after not being there at the World Cup. But overall, with the exception of a McCarthy, a Nash, Crowley, obviously, at 10, it's an Ireland team that I think is still going to be in a great place. Very similar to the team that we saw win the Six Nations last year, with the exception of Johnny Sexton. How they adapt and what happens at fly half, how big a loss he is obviously going to be a big talking point and a big narrative heading into this game. And then on the back of it, depending on how Ireland go, but a really strong Ireland team. Let's get us on to France. So France has a few interesting bits and bobs. As I say, I'll put the team up on the screen. I suppose three things for me. Number one, Pitu Mouvaka starts at hooker. Julien Marchand is on the bench. This is only interesting in so much as it once again highlights how good Mouvaka was when Marchand got injured at the start of the World Cup and Mouvaka came in and was absolutely exceptional. Because, probably this time last year, Julien Marchand was my favourite hooker in the world. He's such a good player. It was awful to see him get injured early in the World Cup, but Mouvaka came in and was excellent. So he starts, Marchand on the bench. What a position of strength that is for France. But I think it's interesting that Mouvaka keeps that starting spot. The other thing, I'll come back into the forwards in a minute, but in the back line, Yoram Moefana starting on the wing instead of Louis Biel-Biarré. Now Moefana, they both play for Bordeaux, but Moefana has been playing in the centres and Biel-Biarré has been, along with Luku and Jalabert and Penaud, starting on the wing and tearing teams apart. They have had such a good start to the season. Anyone that has watched them in the Champions Cup will have seen them tear Bristol apart, tear Saracens apart. That Bordeaux team is brilliant. But the fact that Biel-Biarré is on the wing and Biel-Biarré is on the bench and Moefana starts on the wing, that to me is about size. And again, going back to the whole physicality thing and where both coaches are maybe looking ahead of this game, Fabien Galthie has spoken about the fact that he thinks it's going to be a real physical battle. And I think Moefana, one, he's been in great form, admittedly playing in the centres, but he's a bigger body than Biel-Biarré and perhaps is seen as a safer option in terms of the kicking battle, defensively as well. We know the young lad is so good when he gets his hands on the ball and in attack. There are still some question marks over what he's like under a high ball and in defence. So I think that's why Moefana is the man that starts there. The one other area of the team that I just wanted to mention was Gabriag, I hope I got the pronunciation right, in the second row. Him partnering Paul Willemse, and then you've got Roman Taufifenua and Cameron Woki on the bench. From what I can understand, again, comes back to the physicality and the kind of grunt work that he's going to bring in that second row, and they prefer someone like Woki as a bit more of an electric, dynamic finisher, whereas Gabriag is going to hit rucks, he's going to do the ugly work, he's going to be in that engine room, and that is what he's going to bring to the side, as well as being in really great form. So two fascinating teams. I think it's going to be a physical battle. I think it will live up to the hype as well. You look at these two teams facing each other over the last two Six Nations, that game in Paris, which was excellent, could have gone either way. France win it, end up winning the Grand Slam. And then last year, that match, which quite quickly got labelled arguably the best match in the history of the Six Nations in Dublin. It has lived up to the billing, and I hope it does, because are we currently witnessing one of the great rivalries in the Six Nations era? And I mean, I know all the teams in the Six Nations have some sort of rivalry because they play each other every year, and in terms of some of the fixtures, it goes back over 100 years. But in terms of eras, and these two teams being the best two teams in the Northern Hemisphere and going at each other in the Six Nations and some of the tussles that they have thrown up, I just wonder whether we are fortunate to be living in that kind of moment and whether we will have looked back maybe in however many years' time at these games and at these two teams with these coaches and the players they have and think, blimey, we were lucky to be able to witness that. Let's hope it lives up to it in Marseille. The final thing, obviously, to mention with France, I kind of brushed over it with Ireland and the absence of Sexton, is the absence of Antoine Dupont. Quite an interesting talking point, and I might do a video on it if I get time, I'm not sure if I will before Friday, of who is the bigger loss, Dupont or Johnny Sexton. I would make the case for Sexton. Plenty of people I've seen in the comments of other videos I've done have said that it's Antoine Dupont. Maxime Lucu has been in such good form for Bordeaux. We saw him come in the World Cup. He's partnering Mathieu Jalibert, who, as I've said already, is his club teammate. I think those guys will be able to fire and will get the best out of one another. But I tell you what, it's going to be fascinating, isn't it? Let me know down below, what do you make of these two teams? What are you most looking forward to? What strikes you when you look at these two squad selections that Fabien Galthié and Andy Farrell have gone for? I look forward to reading your comments. Hopefully, if you're still here with me, thank you for watching to the end of the video. If I can earn your subscription, like the video as well, and I'll see you in the next one.